Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Tonight, we're bringing to you an informational session and a hearing related to our request for redesignation and maintenance plan for attainment of the partial Wayne County 2010 primary 1-hour sulfur dioxide non-attainment area. Now, that's a big mouthful. Hopefully, this informational session will help break down what is going on with this request and also give you an opportunity to ask some questions and get some answers on that. But before that, we're going to talk a little bit about some housekeeping, a little bit about how the evening is going to run, and then I'm going to introduce everybody to the staff that we have on our panel tonight. But first, let's talk a little bit about housekeeping. So we will be recording the meeting in case you have to jump off early, or if you have folks that you know of that would be interested in this, we'll be sharing that link a little bit later after the meeting is done. Also, all lines are muted during the meeting, so that's going to be something important to know as well. We'll get back to the question and answer part where you'll be able to ask questions and also you'll be able to comment verbally as well. And I know we have some, at least one person that had called in tonight, so we'll do our best to make sure that we are talking about things in a way that you can understand, but there is a way for you to be able to ask questions, and I'm going to go over that right now. So as we go through the informational session, you can definitely put any questions that you might have in the question and answer box using that at the bottom of your screen. Once we get to the end of the informational session, we'll open it up for questions. We'll get to those questions that have been typed in. You can also ask your questions verbally, so you'll do that by raising your hand using that raise hand icon on the bottom of the screen. And for anyone who is calling in, you're going to want to remember #2 on your phone will virtually raise your hand for you so that we can see that you want to ask a question or make a comment once we get to the hearing portion of the night. And I'll go over this again later as well, just to remind everybody. So how things are going to work tonight, because we're doing an informational session and a hearing, I just want to talk a little bit about the differences in those two parts of the evening. So the first part, we're going to do that informational session. We have our staff here to talk a little bit about what this request is. After that, we'll go into a question and answer session where we will be responding to any questions that you might have either typed in or that you ask verbally. So we'll do our best to answer those. We'll also do that until about 7 o'clock or whenever your questions are done, whatever comes first. So we try to stick with that timeline as best we can. So if we don't get all the questions answered this evening, we're definitely happy to talk about those later as well. And then the second part of the evening is the hearing. And once we shift over to the hearing, we won't be responding to any questions that you might have. So a lot of times when people put their comments out and verbalize their comments, they might ask a question in the comment. The hearing portion of the night is not a time where we'll be responsive. We'll just be listening to your comments, and those will be for the record. So wanted to just briefly talk about those two portions of the night and how they're different. Another thing that we like to do is just establish group norms for the meeting tonight. So this is something that we worked on with a Flint Environmental Advocacy Coalition, and they helped us kind of put together these group norms just so that all of our meetings and hearings, everybody's on the same page. So the first thing that we like to do as part of our group norms is make sure we're listening actively with an ear to understanding. That's going to be really important tonight because this is a complicated issue for sure. But then we also want you to ask questions and request clarification. So if something's not making sense, we definitely encourage those questions. If we're going to criticize something, we want to make sure that we're criticizing ideas and not individuals. We want to make sure that we're communicating respectfully with each other. And then we also want to take space and make space, which basically just means that we want everybody to have an opportunity to be involved in the meeting in a way that they would like to be. All right, so I'm going to invite my panelists to start turning their cameras on. And the first thing that we're going to do is introduce you to who we have here tonight. But before we get to that, we have Annette Switzer on with us. She is our Air Quality Division Director. And I know she wants to formally welcome everybody to the meeting tonight. So Annette, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take away the microphone.
Thank you, Jennifer. As Jen said, I am Annette Switzer, EGLE's Air Quality Division Director. Having the opportunity to talk to all of you about sulfur dioxide redesignation request is a really important part of this process. Redesignating an area back to attainment can take time, and there are numerous steps in that process. We have worked for years to get to the point where we could open this request for comment. Our air quality staff will share more details about the request itself and walk you through a timeline of actions so far. It's so nice to have you all with us tonight, and we appreciate everyone's interest. I encourage you to ask questions and share your thoughts and comments tonight. I will be listening closely to what everyone is sharing. So thank you all for being here. And Jen, I will pass it back to you so we can get to the rest of the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Annette. I appreciate that. You'll be seeing Annette more once we get to that hearing portion of the night. So, but the rest of the staff we have, the first person that I want to introduce you to is Erica Schuff. So Erica works in our air quality division on developing plans to meet air quality standards like the SO2 redesignation that we were talking about tonight. So you're going to be primarily hearing from her. She'll take the microphone away from me in just a little bit here. But before I pass things over to her, I want to introduce everyone else. So we have Susan Kilmer. She's one of our, she is our air monitoring manager. So she works in our air monitoring section and manages the staff that work with our stationary air monitors. That a lot of that information was used to get to this designation tonight. So that's really important. Jim Haywood is one of our air modelers. So I always like to talk about those two things kind of next to each other because they sound very much the same, but they're very different. So in Jim's job, he actually uses computer models to look at what impacts of pollution might be in certain areas around facilities and things like that. Another person that I want to introduce you to is Janelle Trohill. And so Janelle's on, she's actually a permit engineer in our permit section, and she's on tonight because part of the work that went into putting this redesignation together was doing some changes to some facilities' permits to reduce their emissions. So if we have any questions related to that, we'll definitely count on Janelle to hopefully be able to answer those. We also have Bob Irvine. Now, Bob wanted me to introduce him as Erica's boss. So he is Erica's boss, but he also is a fountain of historical knowledge around this issue and a lot of attainment issues. Like Annette mentioned, these can take many years, and there's a lot of steps that go into getting to a place like where we are tonight. So Bob's going to be a great resource for us. A couple other people that I'm just going to mention, they don't have their cameras on, but Caitlin DeVries and Jim Ostrowski, they are both folks who are in our environmental support division, and without them, we wouldn't be able to have meetings like this. So we really appreciate their help and support. If everybody besides Erica, if you guys want to turn your cameras off, I'll let you sit in the background just for a little bit until we get to the question and answer. But Erica, if you want to leave yours on, I'm going to pass it over to you in just a minute. But I want to go over the agenda really quickly. We talked a little bit about how the meeting was going to run tonight, but I just want to let you know a little bit more about the pattern of things we're going to talk about. So you met all of our staff. Except for me, I guess I didn't introduce myself. Jennifer Dixon. Sorry, I should have done that. Sometimes I forget. So the first thing we're going to do, shift into that information session. We'll discuss the proposed request. You'll hear a lot, like I mentioned, from Erica. We'll shift over into that question and answer session where you get to ask questions of our panelists. Hopefully, we'll be able to get you answers tonight on that. Then we'll move over to the public hearing. After the hearing, we will talk a little bit about how you can submit an official comment. We are still accepting comments until midnight tonight. So if you don't make a comment tonight, that's totally fine. You can email Erica a comment after the meeting. Maybe you want some time to think about it. Perfectly acceptable. And we'll give you her information in a little bit. And then we'll talk a little bit about where you can find other information if you are looking for it. So without further ado, I know I try to get through my housekeeping slides as fast as possible, but I'm going to go ahead and, oh, sorry about that. I'll pass it over to Erica. Erica, and you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right. Thanks, Jen. So as Jen mentioned, I'm Erica Schuff, and I work in the Air Quality Division, where I work on developing plans to meet air quality standards. Before we get into the details of the sulfur dioxide attainment status requests, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the Air Quality Division does. Air pollution comes from many different sources, including power plants, fuel burning vehicles, and various industrial sources. The overall mission of the Air Quality Division is to protect public health and the environment. We provide this protection by using our authority under state and federal laws to regulate industrial sources. Air quality staff do a lot of different things, like Jen mentioned. These include, but are not limited to, monitoring levels of air pollutants, developing rules and regulations to meet and maintain the national ambient air quality standards, conducting inspections of facilities and writing air permits. And additionally, we forecast air quality and run computer models to predict pollutant impacts. Before I go into detail on the proposed request for redesignation, I want to cover some terms and phrases you'll hear throughout the presentation tonight. First and foremost are two plans I'll refer to often. These are the State Implementation Plan, or SIP, a Federal Implementation Plan, or FIP. A SIP is a living document that provides requirements for implementation, maintenance, and enforcement of each national ambient air quality standard. In the presentation today, we will refer to the SIP as the plan or the state plan. A Federal Implementation Plan, or FIP, is a plan developed by the United States Environmental Protection Agency in the event a state like us does not submit a SIP, the SIP is incomplete, or the SIP is disapproved by EPA. In the presentation today, we will refer to the SIP as a federal plan. Throughout the presentation, you will hear me mention whether an area is in attainment or non-attainment. So let's discuss what that means. An area being in attainment means that the area is at or below a particular standard. An area being in non-attainment means an area is exceeding a standard. For example, today we'll be talking about the 2010 Primary Health-Based Standard for sulfur dioxide. In 2010, EPA set the standard at a concentration of 75 parts per billion. It would be considered as being in attainment of the standard. Let me repeat that. They set the standard at a concentration of 75 parts per billion in the outdoor air. If an area was documented as being at or below 75 parts per billion, it would be considered as being in attainment of the standard. However, if an area was documented as being above or higher than 75 parts per billion, it would be considered as being in non-attainment. This is what happened in the area of Southwest Detroit, currently designated as being in non-attainment. Another couple of things we'll be talking about tonight are air monitoring and computer modeling. So what do they entail? The type of air monitoring we'll be discussing is ambient air monitoring. This means we are monitoring air that is available to the public outside. The air is monitored at sites throughout the state for specific pollutants, air toxics, and meteorological data like wind speed and temperature. This monitoring data is required to be provided to the public and is also used to determine attainment status of air quality standards set by EPA. Computer modeling at the state is completed by our meteorologists like Jim, who's on the call today. Modeling uses a computer program to estimate impacts of a pollutant from a facility to the ambient air. Modeling helps fill in the gaps where we don't have monitors and estimate emissions in the ambient air. Some of the elements used in modeling include stack parameters such as pollutant emission rates and stack diameter. Additionally, meteorological data is used, for example, wind speed and temperature. And another element used in modeling is terrain, so think hills and valleys. Now that we've gone over some of the terms and phrases you might hear along the way, I'm going to provide information on our proposed request for redesignation for the partial Wayne County sulfur dioxide non-attainment area. We would like to submit this proposed request because review of air monitoring data in the non-attainment area has shown attainment or has met the sulfur dioxide standard since 2014. Additionally, computer modeling shows attainment of the sulfur dioxide standard. Our proposed request would be sent to the US EPA for review and consideration. The timeline associated with this work started in 2010 when the health-based standard for sulfur dioxide was created. In 2013, US EPA determined the 2010 sulfur dioxide standard was not being met at the air monitor identified as Detroit Southwest. Since this monitor was not meeting the standard, EPA designated a portion of Wayne County as being in non-attainment or not meeting the standard. All right, so remember when we talked about air monitoring. So air monitoring data was reviewed while determining what areas of the state were in attainment of the standard. EPA looked at data from 2009, 2010, and 2011. Based on this review, EPA designated a portion of Wayne County as being in non-attainment of the sulfur dioxide standard. So on this slide, we're going to discuss the Wayne County non-attainment area in more detail. On the left side of your screen, you can see a close-up image of a portion of Wayne County. The area outlined in blue and shaded in is the non-attainment area. There are 5 sulfur dioxide monitors in this area. The Detroit Southwest monitor is the original monitor that did not meet the sulfur dioxide standard. There are 4 other monitors located in the non-attainment area. The monitor identified as NMH 48217 was installed in 2016, and the 3 other monitors identified as Trinity, Military Park, and DP 4th were installed in 2018 associated with the new Gordie Howe International Bridge. The specific description of the non-attainment area boundaries is as follows. So if you live in the area, this might sound familiar. The area bounded on the east by the Michigan-Ontario border, on the south by the Wayne County-Monroe County border, on the west by Interstate 75 north to Southfield Road to Interstate 94, and Interstate 94 north to Michigan Avenue. And on the north by Michigan Avenue to Woodward Avenue, and a line on Woodward Avenue extended to the Michigan-Ontario border. So what happened next? States with areas designated as being in non-attainment for the standard are required to submit to EPA a plan demonstrating how the non-attainment area will attain the standard. Review of air monitoring information shows that the Detroit Southwest monitor began meeting the SO2 standard in 2014. Additionally, the 4 other SO2 monitors in the non-attainment area have met the standard since they were installed in 2016 and 2018. However, during EGLE's plan, EGLE determined that other parts of the non-attainment area could be exceeding the standard, specifically large sources of sulfur dioxide. Okay, so this is a chart showing the design value or highest concentration areas over a 3-year period for each monitoring location since 2014. As a reminder, the sulfur dioxide standard is 75 parts per billion, which can be seen on this line here in brown. Looking at the chart, you can see that these monitoring sites have not exceeded the standard since 2014 or after they were installed. So on the screen here, you see this blue line represents the Detroit Southwest monitor location. This line here represents Military Park. This line starting here is representing NMH 48217. This next line, it's more darker green. It represents our Trinity monitor. And then the lower line on the chart here represents the monitor identified as DP4. All right, so remember when we discussed computer monitoring earlier. Modeling is when we use a computer program that allows us to insert all the data we have, including what we monitored in the area, what some companies are allowed to release, the weather conditions, and the weather conditions to get a better idea on sulfur dioxide emissions near the areas with large sulfur dioxide sources. The modeling completed by our air quality staff utilized the maximum allowable emission rates for the facilities listed here. So we have US Steel, EES Coke, Carmeuse Lime, DTE Trenton Channel, as well as DTE River Rouge. Here's a high-level look at the work which was completed between 2016 and 2022, which we will discuss in further detail over the next few slides. However, in May of 2016, EGLE submitted its plan. However, EPA partially disapproved the plan in 2021. Because EPA disapproved a portion of the plan, EPA was then tasked with the development of a federal plan, which was completed in November of 2022. In May of 2016, EGLE submitted our plan. As a reminder, this is called a State Implementation Plan, or SIP. It's a mouthful. The plan required several of the sources of sulfur dioxide to reduce emissions. All but one of these sources agreed. The source sued EGLE and won, and EGLE's plan was no longer complete enough to be approved by EPA. So like I mentioned earlier, because EPA could not approve our plan, a federal plan was developed. This plan included newly proposed limits on sulfur dioxide emissions and requirements for several facilities in the area. Computer modeling was used to look at how the existing and proposed sulfur dioxide emission limits, as well as some other requirements, would impact the attainment status of the area. This modeling showed that the Southwest Detroit or Wayne County non-attainment area would be back in attainment with the standard. So moving forward, EGLE incorporated the elements from the federal plan into a revised state plan and submitted it to EPA in December of 2022. We also submitted 3 supplements to the plan between 2023 and 2024 to incorporate permit conditions for several large sources of sulfur dioxide. Putting them into the state plan made the emission limits federally enforceable. This is an important step to moving into attainment. The reductions we put in place have to be permanent and enforceable. And then on December 3rd, 2024, the EPA proposed to approve EGLE's revised plan. Final approval of the plan is still being determined by EPA as of late. So there are 7 facilities in the non-attainment area that have emission limits and/or requirements included in the plan. While not listed on this slide, I wanted to mention that DTE Monroe and the Marathon Refinery were included in the computer modeling completed by US EPA. So these are the facilities included in our plan: US Steel, EES Coke, Cleveland Cliffs Steel Corporation, Dearborn Industrial Generation, Carmeuse Lime, DTE Trenton Channel, which is shut down, as well as DTE River Rouge, which is shut down. So in conclusion, this brings us as to why we have this proposal to redesignate the area to attainment with the sulfur dioxide standard open for comment. Based on the evidence we have and the data we have collected and reviewed, as well as the computer modeling done to show that the area is meeting the standard, we feel that the partial Wayne County non-attainment area is now in attainment. This was accomplished through reductions of sulfur dioxide and federally enforceable emission limits. The remaining step is for EGLE to submit this request for redesignation of this non-attainment area to attainment. This will be done by submitting a redesignation request to EPA and for EPA to review and approve that request. It is important for the state to have an approved attainment plan, an approvable plan, an approved plan, and redesignation will legally support the fact that the area is attaining the standard. So thank you for listening along, and I hope our discussion helped you understand the attainment and redesignation process a little bit better. So Jen, I'm gonna pass it on back to you, and we can get to any questions people might have on what I talked about.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. All right. So if I can have my panelists turn their cameras back on, that would be great. As a reminder to folks that are joining, so first I wanted to just say we've got about 22 attendees outside of our panel that are listening in today. I know we try to share at least the number of people who are listening in. Sometimes I think that it's showing and sometimes it's not showing, so just want to make sure that folks know that. Also, as a reminder, we do have a couple people that have called in. So if you're calling in and you do have a question, you're going to use #2 on your phone to raise your hand, and then we'll be able to unmute your line so you can ask your question verbally. Otherwise, you can go ahead and type any questions that you might have into the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. So, all right. Well, we did have a couple of questions that came in at the very beginning. So one of the questions is related to whether or not certain companies, like especially the ones that you had mentioned in that list there at the very end, whether or not their compliance status. So do they have violation notices or not have violation notices, things like that, that are in this non-attainment area, whether that is something that's taken into account when we're looking at whether an area should be designated or not designated. So I know you mentioned some of the factors that go into this redesignation request, and you did mention that some of those companies did take legally enforceable limits to lower their sulfur dioxide emissions. So I don't know if you can just kind of talk about whether or not compliance status is taken into account at all when we're looking at redesignations or designations.
Yeah, I can try to take that one. That's a good question. So as we worked on our redesignation request, that is something we are including or have included in this draft proposal that you can find online. There are attachments that include the compliance status for several of these facilities, if not all of them. So that is something we're taking into consideration, and we had checked in with our inspectors in the Detroit office, as I believe it was requested by our Region 5, EPA Region 5 staff, that we include a comment on that in our document.
Awesome. Yeah.
That helps answer that.
No, that does definitely. And I asked Caitlin if she could share the link to that proposal. So hopefully she'll be able to do that before we end the meeting tonight. And there she is. She is Johnny on the spot always. Thank you, Caitlin, for that. I really appreciate it. So if folks are interested in what Erica was just mentioning, there is some information in that proposal there. This next question is related to health statistics and whether or not health statistics are taken into account when we are looking at redesignation. So I was wondering maybe if you might be able to answer this, Erica, or talk about it a little bit. And if not, Bob might be a good person to talk about this, but what this made me think of is the fact that, what we're here to talk about tonight is redesignating this area back into attainment with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Those National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS as we call them, they are health-based standards that do take into account health information and things like that. And EPA does look at those on a certain time frame basis, and I think you're going to be able to talk about that probably a little bit better than I am. But just that was one of the questions that they had is, are those things taken into consideration when we're doing the redesignation? And it just made me trigger with how the NAAQS are developed. And I know we didn't really talk about that in the presentation tonight. So if you have a little bit to add, and then Bob, if you can chime in if there's anything that we're missing, that would be appreciated. But I'll pass it over to you first, Erica.
All right, thanks, Jen. Yeah, you kind of started where my mind initially went with this standard, this 2010 sulfur dioxide standard is our primary or health-based standard. And as EPA, they go through they go through a review every so often, so many years. They review different scientific articles, and they have a whole committee of like staff who that's their job and that's their career, is looking into these pollutants and how it impacts the public's health. So when that review happened before the 2010 standard came out, that's something that was considered, and this was a level that committee and EPA thought was a good standard or level to be set at 75 parts per billion. So while we don't exactly per se have anything written up in I don't think there is anything in the actual redesignation request, like on the health of the area. That is how EPA comes up with their like health-based standard. They look into the research and dig around, and they have scientific articles and scientific people on their staff and whatnot that look into that. And I don't know if Bob can add anything.
I'll just add that just to say that that the area in Southeast Michigan, was we determined that it was not meeting the health standard by that monitor at the Southwest High School location, and that's really what how the Clean Air Act was designed to assess air quality in the different parts of the state and the different parts of the country, is by setting those six ambient air quality standards. That is our guide. That's the state guide to assess if the air is meeting the health-based standard, and so that's basically how our air program ensures that the air is really meeting the health-based standard, is just by the monitoring. And when we show it to be over, then it falls to us to come up with a plan to lower that level to a level that EPA has determined is adequate.
Well, it's a good segue, Bob, actually, because another question came in. And I don't know that we're going to be able to answer this specifically with a number, but the question was for other areas of our state or of the country in general that were in non-attainment with that SO2 National Ambient Air Quality Standard, the sulfur dioxide National Ambient Air Quality Standard. Do we have any idea of how we measured up as far as how long it is taking us to get to this point? I mean, when I know, Erica, you shared your timeline. This kind of started with the 2010 standard. In 2013, we were redesignated, and then now we're here in 2025. So that does seem like a long time. There's a lot of steps that you went through in there, but I don't know if you have any sense of how. Is that typical that it's going to take that long, or because we had the state plan and the federal plan and all those things, it took us a little longer. So
I think it's not typical, and EPA recognized all along that our area in Southeast Michigan was unique because of all of the large SO2 sources that were so congregating in that one area. And so with the process of developing a plan to lower emissions, it meant working with all these different companies and trying to get an agreement to to get reductions from the various companies. And I guess you can imagine that, one company may prefer that his neighbor do the reductions and not him. And so that's just the dynamic that we had to deal with. And that it took quite a while to come up with a plan, but ultimately one of those sources ultimately did not agree and sued the state, and that was a setback. Then EPA had to come in um, and do the analysis themselves, basically almost start over. And as far as what's happening in the region or the country, we're probably most familiar with, the states around us in our region. And I do know that there was an area in Ohio that just recently, I think, was out with a redesignation proposal. So it varies all over the board, but I will say that our area was probably one of the more complex ones in the country that had to be dealt with.
Yeah, thanks for talking about that. I remember when we were first kind of getting ready for this, I was like, wow, that has been that long, and I've been working here that long, so I should have been more aware of it. But yeah, thank you for sharing a little bit more of that history. We're happy to share more if people have further questions. This question is going to go to you, Susan. So the question is related to monitors. So the question is, did all the monitors along I-75 in the bridge area and 48217 air monitors look for sulfur dioxide and black carbon levels? Is that kind of what we said? And then the second part of that question is, did we look at I-96 and Telegraph Road areas for those levels as well? So I don't know if you can talk a little bit about the monitors in this area and what we're measuring for.
Yeah, the areas in Southwest Detroit, the ones that Erica was talking about, most of those, well, all five were measuring SO2, and 4 of them were measuring black carbon. So the site at New Mount Herman was not measuring black carbon, but the other ones were. Then as far as along 96, the Eliza Howell site, that site does not measure SO2. That's a near road site, and it measures NO2 and CO. Yeah, just NO2 and CO at the Eliza Howell site, which is along 96.
And you said New Mount Herman, that's our 48217.
Yes.
Our
Yep.
bigger site there. So just to make sure that that's the site.
Yeah, the site that was referred to as NMH 48217, that site is actually located at New Mount Herman Baptist Church, but we shorten it just kind of for brevity. And it's in the 48217 zip code.
Yeah, thanks for talking through that. So I
Sure.
don't have any other questions in the question box right now, but I want to make sure we give people with plenty of time tonight to answer other questions if folks have them. So just give you another minute. A reminder, if you're calling in, #2 on your phone if you have a question. That should raise your hand for us. So just giving folks another minute, make sure nobody's typing. Doesn't have the little bubble that moves to let me know that people are typing things in. So I want to make sure we give you a lot of time there. All right, so I do have one of our callers with a question. So hold on one second here, and then you should be able to go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, you can hear me?
Yes, I can. Yep, perfect.
Thanks, Simone Segorek. I have 2 questions. Is that okay to ask too?
Yeah, if you don't mind asking one, and then we'll come back to you for another one, if that's okay, just so that we can make sure we're addressing them. I'd appreciate that.
No problem, no problem. So I'm wondering, and I didn't hear comments about this. I appreciate the overview that was given, but so there's this pending sale of U.S. steel facilities, like the Zug Island plant, for example. Have the future emissions of any steel facilities that may be coming back online, has that been calculated and determined that even with them back on, the Southwest area in question would still be, well within the 75 parts per billion or the attainment standard?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'm not sure that we'll be able to exactly address potential future emissions, but I will send it over to Jim Haywood. I know he did our computer modeling, so he'd be the best one to know kind of what went into that model, what did we future cast, what were we kind of looking at. So Jim, if you don't mind kind of talking a little bit more about that, I think that could be helpful.
Yeah, I was just doing a sneak peek at the EPA's final runs that they did on this, because Zug Island was uh, not surprisingly one of our problem areas in the modeling study that we did. And in fact, it was a great question that kind of leads into another point, looking at the reductions that we did have in that area. But the Zug Island itself, U.S. Steel has shut down all of its processes except for one boiler house that they've got on there, which they had to keep open because they had contractual agreements with the ES Coke to provide steam. We noted that River Rouge is shut down. It's not coming back. It's being dismantled. The same thing with Trenton Channel. It is shut down. It's not coming back. The Monroe Power Plant, which is a very large power plant that's at the bottom area in Monroe County, which is the main reason we took the non-attainment area that far south. It was one of the largest SO2 sources in the Midwest, and they have gone through and they have done a complete overhaul and put very good controls in all their boilers down there where they cut their emissions over 90%. So that's a reduction that's going to stay reduced. Uncontrolled emissions will not come back from that one. So we have a lot of reductions. Now the question whether or not can U.S. Steel open their Zug Island operations again, I honestly don't know that one right off the fact. I don't know if the permits have been voided out or if that situation is a temporary thing. But if it is temporary, what I can tell you, if the permits were not voided out, then those sources were included in the modeling study that we did, which would even be an over prediction because, like I said, they are not operating right now, even though if they could operate, then those sources were taken into account in the modeling study. So hopefully that answers your question.
Was that helpful, at least for part one of the question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And we can get you some more information too. I know we do have some of our district staff that are listening online. So if there's more follow-up, we can always, I know you're calling in, but if you would like to give us a call, we're definitely happy to talk about that a little bit more when we have all that sort of information in front of us. But you said you had another question. So what else have you got for us tonight?
Okay, I'm wondering if I believe we are still in non-attainment for ozone and that we are or will be for particulate matter with the improvement of that standard. And I'm wondering how non-attainment for other pollutants is considered when deciding about attainment for another pollutant. Like how is that taken? Sort of like looking at the cumulative impact, which we talk a lot about and we are concerned about.
Yeah, that's a great question. So this area actually is in non-attainment for ozone now, and the PM designations, the particulate matter designations haven't been finalized yet. So as of this moment in time, we're just looking at what the sulfur dioxide non-attainment area would be. But I don't know, Erica, if you can talk about, is there overlap or interplay with the different non-attainment areas? If that had been the case, if that was something that we would be considering as we look at SO2, or are we looking at the pollutants pretty separately? And you might need to pass it over to Bob too. Feel free to do that if there's something else that needs to be added.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So primarily since we're trying to redesignate this area back as an attainment for the sulfur dioxide standard, we're just looking at the sulfur dioxide pollutants. We're not really considering ozone or particulate matter during this request or proposed request. And I just wanted to, I wasn't sure what you said, Jen. Ozone for this area is in maintenance now. We're back in, I know there's some legal stuff going on, but we are in attainment for the Southeast Michigan area, which has a maintenance plan, just to verify. But I don't know if there's anything else, Bob, you wanted to add to that?
I think that's you've said it. It's the again, our job, the way the Clean Air Act is structured is that individual national ambient air quality standards are addressed separately. Although I think there's always been ongoing interest to somehow have more of it, maybe a cumulative analysis and compliance strategy, and we do expect that sometimes controls for one pollutant will have a positive impact in reducing other pollutants as well, which is just kind of a side benefit, but that's really not the focus of the effort when we're developing a SIP.
Yeah, those are great questions. Thank you a lot for asking those. Did you have a follow-up? I just want to make sure. Did you have any follow-ups or?
Well, this is Jim. I'm going to do a quick follow-up. While
Okay.
Bob was answering that, I went back and rechecked the modeling input file for those U.S. Steel Zug Island operations, and they were included in the modeling study. And so while they are not currently emitting anything, even if they did come back and go online, our studies showed that it would not contribute to any violation in the area.
Yeah, thanks for adding that on. I know it's interesting when we've been talking about how long, this process has been taking and things like that. And we've been measuring an attainment for a really long time when we're looking at the data and all of the things that Erica mentioned. So some of this, it becomes a lot of just steps in the process to get to a place where we can say, we've been meeting the standard for a long time, which is why we're here tonight. So we appreciate all the questions. These are really great for us to be able to help hopefully offer some clarity in this kind of complicated process that we are working with. I don't have any other questions in the question box, but again, I want to make sure that we have plenty of time that we can take tonight to answer questions folks might have. So I'll just give you another minute or so and make sure we don't have any other ones lingering. And if we don't, that's okay too. We can move right into the hearing portion of the night. So I'll just give you guys another minute to see if anybody has any questions they'd like to type in, and then we'll figure out what we need to do to move forward. All right, well, I think we're going to go ahead and move into that hearing portion. So panelists, thank you so much for responding to these questions. Greatly appreciate the time tonight. Annette and I are going to stay on. We're going to move over into that hearing portion. So if you all panelists want to turn your cameras off, thanks a lot. I appreciate you. All right. So a little bit about public comments before we get into the actual hearing portion. So when we are talking about taking comments on things, we really do mean that everyone is free to comment on anything they would like to. Anything in the draft that Caitlin shared and that Erica put out is open for comment. So if anything is open for comment. There are definitely comments that are more likely to lead to changes in the final action. So things that are focused on the content of the proposed request for redesignation, comments that request specific changes should be made. Certainly anything that was incorrect in our evaluation of the data and information that we have, things like that, are going to be likely to lead to change. There's definitely comments that aren't going to be likely to lead to change, things that are outside of the scope of the request, and whether or not there's strong support or opposition to the request. Those are things that we can't really consider when we're making our final determination. But again, people are definitely encouraged to comment on the things that they feel are important. So we do appreciate all comments. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into that hearing portion of the night. And I do have to read just a quick, hopefully, opening statement for the hearing, and then we'll start calling names of folks who would like to make a comment. So again, that's going to be, we didn't really have anybody who registered necessarily ahead of time, so we'll get to everybody who raises their hand and wants to make a comment. So Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the public hearing. My name is Jennifer Dixon. I'm with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, or EGLE, and I will be your hearing officer tonight. So Annette Switzer, our Air Quality Division Director, is also on. She is listening to your comments tonight as well. This hearing is related to EGLE's request for redesignation and maintenance plan for attainment of the partial Wayne County 2010 primary 1-hour sulfur dioxide nonattainment area. The Air Quality Division regulates sources of air pollutants to minimize adverse impacts on public health and the environment. Our responsibilities, including working to return areas of non-attainment to attainment, as with the sulfur dioxide non-attainment area in Wayne County. The law governing those responsibilities is Part 55 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. Tonight's hearing allows public input on EGLE's redesignation request, which is still under review. No decision has yet been made. We will consider comments within our authority and cannot address concerns such as zoning, traffic, noise, or other concerns outside the scope of the redesignation request. Support or opposition to the request will be noted, but the law does not allow us to base our decision on public opinion. This hearing is being recorded and your comments will be considered in the decision-making process. The comment period, which began on December 23rd, 2024, ends at midnight on January 28th, 2025. After the comment period closes, all comments will be reviewed, significant air quality related comments will be considered, and changes may be made to the redesignation request. All interested parties, those on the mailing list, commenters, and hearing attendees will be notified of the decision by mail, including a letter from the decision maker and, if applicable, the redesignation request links. Our staff are here to ensure a fair opportunity for you to express your views on the redesignation request and listen to your comments. You do not need to comment during the hearing to have your input considered. Written comments can be submitted via email until midnight tonight. I'll explain how to do this after the hearing. If you'd like to make a comment tonight, you may comment verbally using the raise hand icon on your Zoom toolbar, or you can type the word comment into the question box and then type your comment there. Each verbal comment will be limited to about 3 minutes, and I will notify you when you have around 30 seconds remaining. I'll call on those who indicate they would like to speak first, and after that, anyone else who wishes to comment may do so, and that should be no problem. All right, so we'll get right to that. As a reminder, if you would like to make a comment tonight, phone, you're just going to use that #2 icon. If you would like to make a verbal comment and you're watching with us virtually, just use that raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll know that you would like to make a comment, and I'll call your name and then we will unmute your lines. The one thing that we do ask is when you are making a comment, just make sure that you list or say your name and any affiliation that you may have at the beginning of your comment so that we can make sure that we are getting those on the record appropriately. So if anyone would like to make a comment, you can go ahead and raise your hands now. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any hands raised, which is completely fine. Want to just make sure we're giving folks enough time to decide if they want to make a comment tonight. I don't want to rush into closing out the hearing portion of the night. So I'll give you just 30 more seconds or so in case people are typing something into the question box. I want to make sure we give enough time for that as well. Okay, well, seeing none, Annette, are you okay if I go ahead and close the hearing?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. All right, so thank you for participating in tonight's meeting and for your interest in protecting Michigan's air quality. As mentioned at the start of the hearing, the public comment period closes at midnight, January 28, 2025. All interested parties, including those who commented or attended the hearing, will be directly notified of the final decision. So the hearing is now closed. Thank you again. We have a couple other things to go over before we sign off for the night. I just want to make sure everybody has all the information that they need. So Caitlin has also just shared, or at least tried to share this. This is the first time we've done this, so I hope that it works. But we did put together a fact sheet about this redesignation. Has some high level information, some things hopefully that you can grab that might be a little bit more digestible than the whole redesignation request information. So we did try to share that. I hope if somebody gets it, if you can we got it in the question and answer, that would be amazing. We're just trying out a new capability and wondering if it's working or not. So there's also a little bit more information that we'll share tonight with you in case folks want to submit a comment later. Oh, I don't know what's going on here. Oh, stop going forward. There we go. Sometimes my computer gets a little bit crazy there. So how can you submit an official comment? Like we mentioned, you can send an email to Erica. That's probably the best way because the mail is obviously not going to get there by midnight tonight. But if you can send Erica an email, you can definitely give a comment, or you can call her phone and leave a voicemail. That's also perfectly fine. Because we do have folks calling in, I'm just going to read her email address, which is chefe@michigan.gov. So her last name is S as in Sam, H as in hot, U as in umbrella, F as in Frank, F as in Frank, E as in elephant, at Michigan, all spelled out, .gov as in government. And then her phone number is 517-897-0791. If you'd like to send her an email or leave her a voicemail comment, both of those options are perfectly acceptable. Okay. So if you would like to get more information other than what we shared with you tonight, you can find the public notice document and that proposed redesignation request that Caitlin shared in the chat here. It's also located at michigan.gov/EGLE Air Public Notice, and EGLE Air Public Notice is all one word. So if you'd like to find any information about any public notices that we have out right now, that's a great place to do it. You can also look in our MyEnviro system for things not related to designation requests. All right, so as we mentioned, you can talk to Erica if you have any comments, or she's also happy to answer questions about what happens with the designation request afterwards, next steps and things like that. So with that being said, we really do appreciate folks taking the time to listen tonight to learn a little bit more about this process. Like we mentioned before, and as you heard, it can be quite complicated, but it's pretty interesting. So we do appreciate the opportunity to come talk with you tonight. And thanks a lot for all the great questions. So Caitlin, whenever you're ready, if you want to go ahead and end the meeting, that would be great.